Well, we just got some pretty big news today about the future of PvP in ESO. This came in the form of a fairly lengthy forum post. I'll have it linked down below if you want to check it out. I think the future of the Vengeance campaign could be a bit controversial, but regardless of what you think about the direction, this type of transparency is what players have been wanting for some time now. It's really good to see ZOS digging into the specifics on these topics and sharing their reasoning for the decisions that they're making. We also have a sneak peek at an all-new game mode that is being developed for PvP as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the letter. Community update, Vengeance testing, and Cyrodiil. With the next Vengeance test coming up in December, we wanted to give everyone an update on the Vengeance testing and where we're headed with Cyrodiil. We recognize that you all have questions about the next steps and what these tests mean for the future of Cyrodiil, and we're here to answer some of those questions. We also want to give you as much context and info as possible in the name of transparency. The goals. To recap where we started and where we've been with the Vengeance tests, earlier this year we set out to try some new things with Cyrodiil to address the following specific goals. Number 1, significantly increase the player cap in a Cyrodiil campaign so that campaigns feel lively, full, and there's lots of action to enjoy. Cyrodiil was originally designed to support 900 total concurrent players, 300 per alliance. We have not been able to support those target numbers in the current non-Vengeance Cyrodiil campaigns. We are able to hit 900 total concurrent players with the Vengeance rule set. And we'll find out a little bit later the actual player numbers we're currently getting in Greyhost. The second goal was reduce frustrating latency and related game performance issues in Cyrodiil, especially during large sustained battles, and in turn increase the fun and enjoyment. And then goal 3, through testing, determine if overall ability complexity is the main cause of server stress and game performance issues in Cyrodiil, especially during mass battles and in high population campaigns. We did test other potential causes of server stress and game performance issues in Cyrodiil during the Vengeance tests, such as item sets and procs, consumable items, siege weapons, quests, vendors, etc. Ability complexity was our primary suspected main cause factor though. Test summaries. Since March, we have held 3 Vengeance tests. The next one will be on December 3rd, 2025. For the first test, which was on PC, we introduced the Vengeance rule set, including normalized character stats, attributes, consumables, and Vengeance-specific weapons for all classes. We also disabled things like the champion system, all quests, item sets, and access to banks, vendors, and crafting nodes. The specific goal of this test was to give us a starting point, to reduce things to the most basic level so we could evaluate the findings and begin adding things back in. At the end of the test, we saw the most players ever in Cyrodiil at one time in a single campaign, the largest sustained battles we've ever had in Cyrodiil, and the best overall game performance we've ever seen in Cyrodiil. By all accounts, we were on the right track based on our goals. Survey results were also the most positive following this test compared to subsequent ones, with many participants saying they enjoyed the higher population, improved game performance, lower latency, and overall experience. The aligned Golden Pursuit was also noted as a positive. The loss of unique class character builds and customization was and continues to be the biggest negative point. For the second test, we welcomed the console communities. The Vengeance rule set was largely the same as the first test, with the addition of Vengeance versions of skills from all weapon skill lines and the assault and support skill lines to the available class templates. The specific goal of this test was to build upon the baseline we set during the first test, slowly begin introducing more skill lines and abilities, and evaluate the results. At the end of this test, we saw similar results with better game performance, lower latency, higher population, and larger sustained battles than possible in other Cyrodiil campaigns. This test overlapped with the Zeal of Zenithar event, which we recognize not everyone enjoyed. Survey results for this test were similar in sentiment, leaning positive. Over 80% of participants rated the added skill lines favorably, sharing appreciation for the variety and balance, while also noting that there's room to improve. For the third test, we layered upon what we introduced in the 2 previous tests and added in meatbag catapults as well as performance-tailored skill lines for the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, plus an armor skill line with active abilities for light, medium, and heavy armor. We also introduced certain progression and cosmetic systems into Vengeance, including sky shards, mount selection, titles, and achievements. Similar to the second test, our goal was to introduce more things that players enjoy and expect in a Cyrodiil campaign and monitor the impact of latency, game performance, and overall experience. We did not run a Golden Pursuit during this Vengeance test and saw disappointment about that. We also ran this test during the Undaunted celebration, which some players understandably noted they had higher interest in participating in versus this event. Even though the population in Vengeance was lower during this test, it still performed well and participant numbers were still higher than our typical population caps in a normal Cyrodiil campaign. Survey results for this test were more mixed than the results following the first two, and we saw less positivity overall. More survey participants noted fatigue with the tests and a desire to be able to play their own unique characters and builds in Cyrodiil, and a frustration that the test ran during another in-game event. Test learnings. Throughout the first 3 tests, we learned with certainty that in order to deliver a performant Cyrodiil to support a large-scale PvP zones with mass-scale battles, the abilities, procs, passives, etc. must be lighter versions of the ones that exist in the rest of the game. The set of 4 graphs below illustrate the differences in population as well as the server frames per second during the Vengeance Cyrodiil campaign and non-Vengeance Cyrodiil campaigns. So on the left is Greyhost and on the right is Vengeance. So even though the population is 2.5 times larger for Vengeance, the performance is actually much better. Next steps. For the test in December, we will introduce Vengeance-specific perks and loadout systems for character class templates. These systems are designed to give you a bit more variety over your builds compared to what was available in previous Vengeance tests. Specifically, you will have more control over your stats with 4 pre-build stats packages called loadouts, and perks are passives that give extra combat effectiveness and bonuses to your characters. The intent with these is to give characters a boost that is comparable to a single 5-piece item set that's purely passive, like Giuliano's. We will also be adding a Vengeance-specific inventory, which will store all your Vengeance items. During this test, you will also be able to collect regular items while in the Vengeance campaign. Those items will be placed into your regular inventory. Many systems that were previously turned off in Vengeance will also be turned back on, including quests, vendors, and leaderboards. Scattershot and oil catapults will also join the available options for siege weapons, and keep recall stones and channeled repair kits will also be added. We'll share more detailed notes ahead of the December test. We'll monitor the impact of these additional systems on latency and game performance as we have during prior tests. Lastly, the Greyhost campaign, as it is now, will be up during the second half of this Vengeance test, and will monitor server performance for both campaigns. This comparison will allow us valuable side-by-side data. This will be our final adding new things test, where we compare the game performance of Vengeance with what a campaign looks like with all the systems turned on. We have another test or 2 planned for next year for the sake of evaluating healing versus damage concerns. We'll share more about those next year. So where does this put us, and where do we as a dev team realistically think we're headed for the future of Cyrodiil? With the caveat that the December test still needs to happen, we see 2 realistic paths forward. Scenario 1, we would open a Vengeance Cyrodiil campaign sometime next year with a special rule set based on the previous and upcoming tests, and leave Greyhost open as it is now. Scenario 2, we would close all existing Cyrodiil campaigns and open 1 or 2 Vengeance rule set campaigns sometime next year. As a dev team, Scenario 1 is the one we strongly prefer and is the most likely. We want you to have a choice between playing in Vengeance or Greyhost, and we would closely monitor both campaign populations to help inform any additional actions we should take moving forward. We recognize that some of our players would prefer there be no changes to their characters, effectively how they are in the Greyhost campaign, while enjoying the higher population and reduced latency game performance issues of the Vengeance campaign. This is not something that will be possible. Based on what we have learned from the tests so far, we can offer one or the other, not both, and we want to be transparent about that. So I do have a couple of things I'll say about this last statement here. While I understand the current main Cyrodiil campaign will likely never reach the 900 player count that Vengeance can, I do think that continued efforts should be made to improve performance there too, and possibly increase the player count in smaller increments. If ability complexity was found to be the main cause of the performance concerns, then maybe some of that tweaking could be brought in while Battle Spirit is active to make abilities a bit more performant, but not to the same extent that it is in Vengeance. I feel like they are presenting this as an all or nothing scenario when it doesn't necessarily need to be. But let's go ahead and finish up the letter and I'll give my overall thoughts. Lastly, we do want to share a few early bits about some things we're working on for PvP. You'll hear a little more about these in January. For players who wish to enjoy a PvP experience that is more like Greyhost, we are in the early stages of working on a mid-size PvP space. It will be smaller than Cyrodiil, but larger than our largest battlegrounds, and offer enough room for 3-sided keep warfare and an overall similar experience to Cyrodiil. The goal with that will be to allow players to have their full suite of abilities, unique builds, equipment, etc., just like in Greyhost. We are also working on a PvP progression system that we're excited to tell you a little more about early next year. Thank you all for your continued feedback and support. Your participation in the Vengeance tests and related surveys has been greatly appreciated. I'd like to remind everyone that when we send out surveys where it's important, we are able to verify that participants played the content. We have to send out surveys via email. Please consider opting into these emails if you haven't already, so you may be included in future survey sends. Thank you. Well, this was quite a lot of info from ZOS, definitely much more than we are accustomed to receiving. I appreciate the dive into the specifics of their findings and the rationale behind the pathway forward. I do think many players will be relieved to see that Vengeance is not going to be replacing Greyhost. However, I'm not super confident that the current player count will be able to support both. Would that mean that down the road, Greyhost could still get shut down because there aren't enough players in it? I'm not sure, but it seems like a problem that would be solvable with a healthier player population. I also find it a bit strange that there was so much emphasis from ZOS about Vengeance just being a test. It's just a test, we heard over and over, but it became clear pretty quickly that this could end up as a game mode. There were lots of resources being diverted to it, and especially a month or two ago, once they started talking about adding in a perks and a loadout system, I think many players began to realize that this was more than a test. So it'd be interesting to hear if that is a decision that changed for ZOS as time went on, and if so, when did they decide to make that switch from collecting information to using Greyhost to simply creating a new campaign type altogether? I think many players were under the impression that the intent of this test was to use the findings to create a better Cyrodiil for the current campaign styles, and as I mentioned earlier, I would like to see them continue to try and optimize for the performance in Greyhost as well, and not just give up on that side of things because performance is good in Vengeance. There has to be some useful info from this that could be applied to Greyhost. Now, all of that said, I do think Vengeance will be a campaign type that many players gravitate towards. The barrier to entry is massively reduced compared to Greyhost, and it's a great place to get your feet wet and start figuring out what PvP is about. So, assuming ESO can get their player numbers back on track, having both game modes available could be a big win. And then at the end of the letter, they discussed the new PvP mode coming, as well as a new PvP progression system. The new mode was described as a mid-size PvP space, so I don't know the specifics of that yet, but I'm envisioning something along the lines of 3 factions with 20 players or so on each side. I don't know, what do you guys think when they say medium scale? I will say a game mode like this that's focusing on the keep warfare like Cyrodiil does, that sounds like a fun game mode to me. We'll be getting more info about it in January though, so only a little bit over a month away. Then they mentioned the new PvP progression system as well. No idea what this could be. Maybe some earnable rewards tied to your PvP rank, maybe some further use for AP or Telvar. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one too. But overall, the fact that they're even talking about adding in this new progression system and a new PvP mode, well, it's the first time we've actually heard about anything new coming for PvP since, what, Volendrung in 2019? I know we had a Battlegrounds rework recently, but I wouldn't really call that a new feature. It was more of a rework of an existing feature. PvP has been left high and dry for new content for years and years now, and not but a few months after we hear about the leadership changes at ZOS, we are already hearing about 2 potentially big new features added for PvP. So, like I said in previous videos, I'm getting really good vibes from what I'm seeing from the current leadership, and it's probably too early to tell, but it seems like things might be on the right track overall. But what do you guys think? Is this encouraging for the future of PvP in ESO? Let me know in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you found my videos helpful and you aren't subscribed, it definitely helps out a lot. Big shout out to my Patreon and YouTube members. I really appreciate the support, and a special thanks to these folks here. Couldn't keep doing this without you. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.